Good afternoon, everyone. We're almost there, 4:30. My name's Yash. I'm a senior in the Questrom School of Business. I concentrate in accounting and law, and I did my Keystone on the state of North American carbon markets. So to get into it, what is a carbon credit or a carbon allowance? It's basically like a permission slip that companies are going to go out and buy from the government, basically. So there are compliance markets and there are also voluntary markets. In the compliance market, companies get fined for polluting over their permitted amount. And there's voluntary markets where companies go out and they basically buy permission or they buy forests or ocean-based products that where they can put in their ESG report saying that, wow, we dumped this much money into this project. We're doing really good for the environment. So in a compliance market, we have buyers, investors, and sellers. Usually the buyers and the sellers are the key parties here. Investors tend to be the middlemen. And I have a graph of California's compliance market, the CCA. And it starts off in a legislative phase. I found that it usually stays pretty steady, the prices for credits. And then it goes into a compliance phase, basically, where the companies start buying up these credits. It goes up in steady growth as more and more companies catch on. They don't want to get fined. And then during COVID, a bunch of investors jumped in on these markets, and they really shot the price up, being the middlemen all of a sudden. Right now, we're in a investor-driven phase for most of these markets, but we have a lot of oversight now. So the government has actually gone through and capped the prices. So current issues in the market, a lot of companies have ESG reports, and they're making large claims such as net zero or carbon neutral pledges, but are they actually doing anything? There's really no transparency into what's going on. There's also a lot of discrepancy among rating agencies. So one agency might say that this is a great project, invest in it. Then another agency might say that this is not worth your money. So there's a lot of market manipulation going on. There's also a lot of fraud, and it's a lot of risk for companies to take on. So there's a lot of joint ventures currently. In the US right now, we have a few discrete markets in some states, and we also have one market that spans through a couple states, and we'll get into that. So jumping right in, the low carbon fuel standard market, it's a compliance market, started in 2005 when the EPA proposed some targets about basically reducing the carbon emissions from certain fuels. In 2022 with the IRA, there was a push for clean fuels, so this really got the spotlight, and California emerged as basically the golden state. So I have a graph of California's total credits and deficits over the years. A credit is good, a deficit is bad, so we can see there are a lot of blue going on, which is good. So the cumulative bank of credits in the market is actually going up over time, which is very good. So what's actually creating these credits? Biodiesel and renewable diesel, actually. Sorry, renewable diesel is like this magical new thing that's just going out in the market and basically taking over the market. It's creating so many credits that all these companies are flooding the market with lots of credits, and there's not that many deficits going on. This is California again. So what is the government going to do? Obviously, they're probably going to want to increase the prices of these credits and take them off the market. So California, their LCFS market is extremely liquid. Quebec has actually modeled it after California. It started in 2011 when the California Air Resources Board started assigning carbon intensity scores to various fuels. So fuels over the target create a credit, such as renewable diesel. Fuels below the target need credits, and they need to be offset. Basically, companies need to offset the credits using credits, so they're compliant with the laws and legislation. In 2023, the reduction target for the LCFS was 11.25%, and currently they're on track for 16 to 18%, so that's very good. So they're actually proposing a 35% reduction by 2030, which would obviously increase prices as credits go off of the market. But over time, here's a graph of LCFS in California. We see that a lot of times the prices do decrease because they get sued, or sometimes California changes the way they assign carbon intensity scores. So there's a lot of fluctuation. During COVID, it peaked at over $200, and that's when the California Air Resources Board stepped in and said, we're going to cap it at $200 now. So right now it's about $70 to $80 today. I also looked at the Washington Cap and Invest market. This is brand new. It started this year. They cover about 75% of their statewide carbon emissions, and they actually fine companies of up to $50,000 per day per violation, which is a lot. And they recently had their first auction for carbon credits. They sold a little over 6 million credits, and they raised $230 million. This year, Washington plans on basically auctioning off 63 million credits. So they're going to have a couple more auctions this year. To the right, I have a graph of how they plan on targeting and reducing their carbon emissions. So they want to do a 7% annual reduction for the first 10 years, 2% reduction for the next 10 after that, and then a 2.5% reduction. I also looked at the regional greenhouse gas initiative. This is a very interesting market because it spans across states. It focuses on power plants in the Northeast. They've actually reduced 50% of their emissions since 2005, which is very interesting. But currently, there are a lot of short positions on this market. So the question is, does RGGI align with fundamentals? Do investors no longer believe in this market? But their most recent auction, it was March 8th. They set the price at 250, and with the market adjustment, it actually cleared at $12.50. So that's pretty good. These are the states that participate. You can see New York, Virginia, and Jersey. They're up there, so they get a lot of credits. To look at North America as a whole, basically our neighbors, Mexico has 9 states that have adopted a price for carbon. They all have their own markets and prices within each individual state, but as opposed to the US, they actually want to move towards a more federal or national level market. Canada has their GHG offset credit system that's been in for over a year now, but they're moving towards the clean fuels regulation. That is basically a copy of California's LCFS. So you can see that's been working very well in California, so other countries, other states are following. And since 2014, California and Quebec have held some carbon allowance auctions, joint auctions actually, where they actually sell credits together and they auction off credits together. So that tells you, you can see that sometimes you can see regional initiatives to reduce carbon instead of just statewide emissions. So, in conclusion, what is the state of North American carbon markets? Well, to speak a little bit about the future, it's a little uncertain. Blockchain is moving in, so that is some new technology that's coming in, increasing liquidity in the market, a lot of efficiency, but obviously with new technology, there's a lot of new problems that come in. A lot of new states are joining these markets, but they're all creating their own individual markets. I guess that's just the US's approach. And credit prices overall are decreasing right now. Tech-based carbon credits are moving in, so that's a whole new sector. But current markets are constantly being evaluated, and they're also always changing. Markets are not regulated, which is very interesting. So there's a lot of fraud or whatnot going on. A lot of people don't trust these markets, but there is potential oversight from the CFTC soon. There are a lot of multiple lawsuits being thrown around, and price hedging. Price hedging is very big. The investors are being the middlemen, and they're actually making a fortune off of this market. Work from home, which was big during COVID, is kind of slowing down. Now it's coming to a stop. So the transportation sector is again regaining momentum. And greenwashing in the voluntary markets is a big deal, right? A lot of companies are making big claims, but we don't know if they're actually doing what they say they're doing. And so my last question that I wanted to take a look at was, can we have a federal LCFS model, right? California adopted this, Washington's getting in on this, Canada has something like this. Can we have this at like a national level, a domestic market potentially? Well, currently the answer is no. There was a case that went up to the Supreme Court, West Virginia versus the EPA, and basically the Supreme Court said that the EPA lacks the authority right now to regulate carbon emissions in individual states. But thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. I just want to give a special thanks to my advisor, Pete Lazowski, and Jordan Godwin, who has helped me out throughout this presentation. Questions?
Thank you. This was really interesting. I'm wondering if you can help me think through the relationship between what you talked about and when I go to buy a plane ticket and they say like pay $20 extra and it will offset the carbon of your flight. Like, what is that opportunity being passed on to consumers? How does that relate to the sort of research you were doing about carbon credits?
Right. So when companies are referring to offsets, that's different from a credit or an allowance. So a credit or allowance usually refers to a compliance market where basically the government is regulating how much the carbon they're putting into the environment, and they're forcing them to basically buy up credits, which the government would use that money to, do other things good for the environment. When they refer to offsets, that's when it's a lot of times that they're talking about a voluntary market where a company will maybe say they want to be carbon neutral this year, or they want to do something to be carbon neutral, have a net zero pledge. So when they buy up an offset, a lot of times they're usually nature-based products. So maybe it'll be a forest in Mexico, it could be an ocean-based product somewhere along the coast. And a lot of times, again, that's companies dumping money into these projects, and the project managers usually are doing good for the environment, but there is a disconnect between project managers and the companies that are actually buying these projects. So when the company basically buys this project, and then they say that they offset this much, they don't actually know what's going on. They just dumped a bunch of money in there. But they got to say it on their ESG report.
So, through your investigation into the state of carbon markets in North America, did you explore if they're effective at reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
They are. Canada has done amazing. Again, they had a 11.25% reduction in their LCFS program. That was their target this year. They're on track to hit 16 to 18%. So the programs are working. It's just a matter of, can we have maybe a federal level market, or is it just going to be a bunch of states that are individually going to adopt this? Which in the U.S. kind of makes sense because in the U.S. a lot of states have their own agendas. They have different economies, so it's kind of hard to have a very national or broad market.
Hi, wonderful presentation. I wanted to ask, so there are a couple of states who are trying to push for 100% renewable. State of Hawaii has done that independently by some year, and then the state of California, which a lot of your research seems to come from, they have pledged to become 100% renewable by I believe it was 2045. And I wanted to ask, if there is a federal level market for carbon, do you think that they would just be basically taking the carbon credits that California, used to be using before they went 100% renewable, and so there would be just kind of like a net no change? Or do you think they would take into consideration that certain states have gone or will be 100% renewable and reduce the overall number of carbon credits?
Yeah, so that's the thing about between having a federal or a state level market. California has done an amazing job. They're definitely a leader in basically this industry, and they're moving on towards renewables. Other states, it's very hard to even talk about anything renewable, right? That's just their economy. Maybe there's political views that are going on there. So, a national level, California would definitely skew it if we had a national level market, whereas other states would be kind of lagging behind. It'd be hard for them to follow along.
Hi, great presentation. This might be a little bit tangential to your topic, but I wondered if during your research you ever found that the calculation of the carbon impact itself came into question, because I know in certain industries it's difficult to calculate exactly um, how it's realized, and yeah, if there's transparency that you can lean on.
Right. So again, in California, early January in 2016, after they had implemented the LCFS program for about 3 years, they decided they want to reform the program a little bit and assign new carbon intensity scores. Right. There was a mismatch. Some things just weren't right. So when they fixed the deficiencies in the program and assigned new carbon intensity scores, basically reassigned the prices, there was a huge drop. Basically, you can see the drop in prices right there. And overall, drops in prices is usually them reforming the program or lawsuits going on. So yeah, there is a big impact when they do stuff like that.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. We'll just transition really quickly and then move on to our last presenter. You go.